Is it true that you were once homeless?
Yeah, there was a season. I had a pretty tumultuous adolescence and made some pretty poor choices. And
There's nothing that can suck the life out of you more than traditional schooling. Confusion and despair about your life in general, or really was this just about the academics?
it's a great question. Yeah, I think what happens is for many people is that they just don't feel like they belong anywhere.
When you do that hard work, then the attainment of the goal becomes easy because it just happens. That's what we call life flow or alignment, right? It seems miraculous. It's joyful. It didn't seem like work.
And we talk about this idea that like habits don't stick just because we want them bad enough.
Welcome to the Mark Divine Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Mark Divine. And this show, it's more than a podcast. We're a tribe of bold leaders committed to growing in courage, resilience, and heart. So if that sounds like you want to lead a life with purpose and awareness, then you're in the right place. So, hoo-yah. Super stoked to have my guest here today, Dr. Robyne Hanley-Dafoe. In a world marked with burnout, anxiety, and constant pressure, everyone's trying to hold it together. People aren't lacking information or options, but they are lacking hope. Dr. Robyne is an award-winning resiliency research and educator known as the Hope Scientist. She's got a new book called I Hope So, How to Choose Hope Even When It's Hard. This book reframes hope not as wishful thinking, but as a science-backed strategy for well-being, performance, and mental health. Robyne, thanks so much for having you here. Or thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for me having you here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, and thank you for traveling all the way from Toronto to see our not-so-sunny weather in San Diego.
It's lovely weather. I'll take it.
Well, compared to Toronto, I can see that being lovely, but it's been raining for like a week here.
There you go. I'll take it.
You'll take that?
Yes.
Well, I was hoping you would show up.
I was hoping it would all unfold as it did, so I'm excited to be
You know,
here
we
with
used to
you
say
today.
in the SEALs that hope is not a strategy, but it's sure helpful, isn't it?
Sure is.
Right? Like if we said that hope is not a strategy and we're all pessimistic about the outcome of a mission, we'd be much less likely to succeed.
Absolutely.
Is it true that you were once homeless?
Not
Or
homeless
dropped
per
out
se.
of high school
yes,
dropout. That's
yes,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Well,
haven't been
there was
unhomed.
probably a
Yes.
week where you were homeless.
I'm sure I was
sleeping out of your
on
car.
many couches. But yeah, there was a season. I had a pretty tumultuous adolescence and made some pretty poor choices and ended up in a pretty kind of precarious season where, you know, it was a season, Mark, where all hope felt lost.
Really?
And dropped out of high school, was navigating addictions.
Did you have hope prior to this season, or
Yeah.
what precipitated this kind of?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I would say in childhood that innocence that so many of us have, where it was just, you know, things you look forward to and you had this kind of optimism about the world. And as my story unfolded, I really struggled with school, which is where that kind of started to lose that sense of optimism about the future. And
Guess
Yeah.
what? That happens to a lot of people, doesn't it?
100%. And
There's nothing that can suck the life out of you more than traditional schooling.
100%. And, you know, I really hated school and it hated me back. It was in a system that my learning styles and, you know, my personality, my temperament was designed for. And so I even recall having an educator when I was in elementary school who said, you know, there's really no point in you pursuing high school. You'll never finish.
Wow.
And
That's
I believe that.
optimistic.
Yeah.
That's really motivating statement. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a very burned out educator who had probably seen enough. And so, of course, when grade 10 rolled around, I was failing all my courses and I just realized this wasn't for me. And I
What
dropped
year
out.
was that?
So, oh gosh,
I don't mean like
yeah.
19, but what
Yeah.
year in high school?
So it would have been grade 10. So grade 10.
grade.
Yeah, 10th grade. And I realized this wasn't for me.
Wow.
So, and it broke my parents' heart.
I was just going to ask, how did they deal with that? That
Yeah.
must have been tough for them.
Well, they had I had an older sibling who was soaring in the traditional school system, and I was really struggling. And they loved me so hard, but helplessly. Like I think a lot of families experience when they have a teenager that goes off the rails, off track.
Right.
And Thankfully, though, in the midst of that, especially my mother very much held the hope for me that she believed that we would get to the other side of this.
Mm-hmm. Was this an existential crisis? I mean, were you experiencing confusion and despair about your life in general, or was this just about the academics?
It's a great
The
question.
struggle.
Yeah, I think what happens is for many people is that they just don't feel like they belong anywhere. That
Right.
they don't fit in. That this world, whether it be the classroom or outside of it, is just isn't for them. So emotionally, socially,
Did you
they
feel
felt
like
outside.
a bystander, or like you were looking at the world from
Yeah, it's,
an observer perspective and not participating in it or not included in it?
yeah. I felt like the world was just kind of happening all around me, but didn't
Right.
really know my place in it. And I think you pick up a lot of labels or ideas that, I'm not very smart or I'm not very good. And I think what really kind of exacerbated this issue was the fact that I grew up in such a loving home
Yeah,
that I
like
didn't have
you
a
can't
reason to
point
be
to
like
any
this. Yeah,
trauma or abuse or anything like
exactly.
that necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely.
Interesting.
And one of the things that, that I see, especially now in the work that I do is, the people who need the most help, they ask for it in all of the wrong ways. And so me asking for help took the form of addictions. It just took the form of just, being in the wrong circles of people who held very low expectations of you. And it resulted in a very, very dark season at 16.
Mm.
Yeah.
How long did that last?
So interestingly, it lasts very much until I had experienced a catastrophic car accident.
Oh, good
And
Lord.
at 16, I had a pretty catastrophic car accident where, and as we were just talking about winter weather and
Right.
driving,
Yeah,
and
speaking
before,
of accidents
yeah,
in
speaking of
Canada,
accidents, so I only had my driver's license, Mark, for a week, and I was in this new community. We were living in a new community. My family recently moved. And I was driving home late at night, and a snowstorm rolled in. And I wasn't very familiar with how to drive properly in the snow. The vehicle slid off the road, went down an embankment, and my vehicle crashed through the ice in the Otonabee River. And
Good Lord, we were just talking about that
I
with
know we
snowmobile
were
accidents.
with your snowmobile accident, and so I was trapped in a vehicle that was submerged. And in that moment,
You weren't fully submerged, though, were you?
yes, yeah. I recall
It's terrifying.
I remember that water coming through the floorboards and just how rapidly the vehicle filled with water. And so the vehicle filled with water, and again, frigid water. The vehicle had broke a hole through the ice. It went down, and in that moment, I just recall I actually didn't feel scared at first. I was feeling really angry in that moment, and I was angry that I couldn't protect my mother from what was about to happen. That she had hope for me. She cared about me so deeply. And I just couldn't imagine what that was going to do to her to leave her behind.
Right.
And in that moment, a saying my mother used to always say, Mark, when I was a little girl, was that Robyne could do hard things. So whenever I get myself into situations, she would remind me that I could do hard things. And in that moment, when I was thinking about her, it very much was like almost like this emotional echo where I knew she would tell me to lock in, figure it out. Robyne does hard things. And I couldn't get the seatbelt off. I wasn't able to open the car door. The water pressure was already starting to crush the vehicle. But what I was able to do was actually get my fingertips to where the window met the door, Mark, and I was able to pull the window off its track, slide it down the window, down the door, and swim out the window.
Nice.
When I got to the other side, though, I couldn't tell which way to go, which way was up or down. The current
It's
was
very
moving
confusing.
us. Yeah, and
How deep do you think the car was?
the investigators estimated it was about 20 feet underwater at that point. So
Good Lord,
it was
Robyne.
underwater. Yeah, and but to be able to get my bearings, what I was able to do, Mark, was just to really just exhale, let go of all of the breath
Yeah.
that I was
See which
holding.
way the bubbles go. And
See which way the bubbles go, 100%, and followed those wee little bubbles, and I was able to make it. And thankfully that night there was actually a gentleman.
So was there a risk that the current could have pulled you further under the ice and it would have been hard to find the opening?
100%. Actually,
Holy shit.
when I thought I was about to come out of the water to the surface, I actually remember this like smashing sensation, and I realized my face was hitting the ice because I was trapped underneath the ice. The vehicle had crashed a hole farther upstream, but now I was downstream
Right.
where there was a thin kind of ice over the river, and I was at that moment. It was just a scramble to whatever you can do to break free, and I did break
You broke
free.
through the ice
I
at
did
that
break
point.
through. Yeah, I did break through, and I recall holding the edge, and every time I tried to pull myself up, the ice would start to break and crack, and I'd fall back in. So it was just this cycle. But again, thankfully, that night there was a gentleman by the name of Joseph, and he's just a 30-year-old guy driving home from shift work, and he just happened to see my car tracks in the snow. So he drove along that side of the road, sees me, pulls over his pickup truck, and Joseph grabbed wood and a chain from the bed of his truck. And he used wood to make an X to support his body weight. And he crawled out on that ice and slid out the chain, wrapped around my body, and he dragged me to shore. He was actually awarded the Governor General's Award for Bravery, which
Holy
is the
cow.
highest accommodation for a civilian who's willing to risk their life to save a stranger. So
I think I've seen this in a movie somewhere.
there you go.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it was quite remarkable, but it very much was the turning point where
Wow.
all of a sudden you have this experience, and recoveries are never linear,
Right.
but it gave me new perspective that I wanted to earn my miracle. I wanted to find a different way forward than what I'd been doing up to that point.
Oh, that's cool. That's an amazing insight to have at 16. And I doubt it would have been the same had you not been experiencing the existential crisis and the lack of hope and, the problem and the dropping out, because this was not the end of something. It was the end of something, but it was also the beginning of a rebirth for you.
Absolutely.
As opposed to it being the beginning of a long period of woe is me, why did this happen to me?
Absolutely.
Rather than that, you closed a chapter and used that to springboard into something new.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
That's
so
cool.
often that when people have these catastrophic events, they don't really know where to put it, right? They don't know
Right.
how to process it. And thankfully I had a lot of support in terms of recognizing that this is just part of the story. It's not the whole story. It's what
Sure.
you choose to do next. And
All these incidents are just attempts to wake us up. And so my perspective here is that what a great blessing and honor and a testament to your already life journeys that this happened at such a young age.
yeah, and
I had to wait till I was 60 to hit
say,
my tree. Like,
when your
apparently
tree-
I'm a little slow.
yeah, oh, there you go. But we learned it all unfolds in perfect timing.
That's true.
Yes. Yes.
That's amazing. Have you seen Joe since then?
Do you know, quite interestingly, I'm from a very small town,
Yeah.
and I think it was about 25 years after my accident, the local paper had run a story about where is she now?
Oh,
And at the
interesting.
time I was teaching at the university. And so again, high school dropout to, university prof on, definitely a change of story. And what was interesting, the next day after that article was in our local paper, our 3 children were kind of going, into school like they always do. And their secretary of the school, who had seen my kids since, little, she stopped my kids and said that Joseph is her brother. And so we got an update years later of how he is. And it's so amazing that even when he was being recognized by the Governor General in Canada, he said, I did just what anyone would do.
Yeah,
and
of
so
course.
often it's those moments where it's like, no, you paid attention.
Right.
You looked at the signs. You
Right.
slowed down. You
Slowed
acted.
down, you acted. Yeah.
How many people would have just driven right by that? So I really hold space that,
Right. And fewer, right?
Yes.
Because that was, what, 20, 30 years ago?
yeah, 30 years ago this
30 years
February.
ago? Yeah. We have a training with our SEAL Fit program called Sheepdog. And our goal with the training, and we're quite successful with it, is to train Josephs, right? To get people to be willing and aware enough to recognize the danger and to be able to either get people out of danger or to take action to thwart the danger or to help with the risk mitigation, the healing, right? Immediate, like triage. So we teach them field medicine, and of course there's some legal risk for that, but it's better to save a life and deal with the legal risk than it is to let someone die or bleed out, And we teach them self-defense, like through Krav Maga, which can be taught very simply, and even firearms training, but mostly it's about situational awareness and developing the confidence and courage with a minimal amount of competence to be able, because you don't need a whole lot of competence. You just need to act.
Absolutely.
Anyways,
That reminds me, I remember my boys and I, we always do what we call Mama Boy Weekend. And what we do every
cool.
year, we go to, because I want to like redefine the idea of Mama Boy being a bad thing, right?
Yeah,
Like I
right.
want it to be when people are like, oh, you're such a Mama Boy. It's like, yes, and it's a pride thing. But anyway, we go to a city where we see an NFL game and an NBA game every year. We'll
fun.
pick something. So my boys and I have some pretty amazing memories around this. But I recall we were coming out of a stadium and we were waiting for a ride share, and there was a woman who was actually in a verbal situation with her partner, and it was getting escalated, and there was all of these people around, and like nobody was doing
pulling out
anything.
their cameras.
Yeah, like no one was responding, and so I also thankfully my boys are small giants, so I felt it was like I felt safe
You
in
had
that
your
moment. I
bodyguards.
had my people with me, and but I just called out to her, and I'm like you don't have to get into that ride share with him. Like you don't you can come with us. And there was this moment where all of a sudden I think he realized that like people were watching. I don't think he had any
no, it's
idea that
clueless.
people were were observing this. And in that moment she said she's like, thank you, but I think I'll just get my own. I'll get my own ride. And I'm like, take this one, right? Like, here's what's ours. So I said to the driver who was there to pick up my boys and I'm like, take her wherever she needs to go, and and just make sure she's okay. But again, what's so interesting is like people were just standing by, and it talks about that. There was a woman in Montreal, and they Kitty, that this was a woman who was being attacked, and nobody did anything, and the bystander effect is so real. So I feel really encouraged knowing in your training that you're helping people build that situational awareness.
It's just a small tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, but it's so important.
I think we're getting to a point where if you're not thinking that way, then you're totally checked out. There's almost no hope for you.
Exactly.
Because you are literally just going to follow the herd into the technological dystopia, which is a form of slavery.
It is.
I hate
Absolutely.
to say it.
Yes.
So everyone has to really wake up and really think about their attachment to the technology and to the stories they've been fed, the conditioning, the mental training, and start training your mind. Because if you're not training your mind, the world's training it for you, and it's leading you like a lemming off a cliff. And so this is just part of it, right? The willingness to be like, oh, things don't have to be this way, right? I can move beyond fear, and courage. And the more you do that, the more hope you have, right? Because you see that how much you can shape reality, because your mind shapes reality. It shapes the reality of your own world, right? I often say we don't have one world. We have, from a humanity's perspective, we have 8 billion worlds. And some of those worlds reality, and then we have this human, basically results from language and also how our brains represent the world to us.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
But other than that, if you take control of your mind, you can then uncreate the world that wasn't working for you, like you did and I did when I became a SEAL, and recreate a world that that your heart knows is more optimistic and abundant and prosperous and compassionate.
And it happens by choice.
It
And
has
that's
to happen
something-
by choice, but
it's a
that's why I think
decision.
back to your accident or, my existential crisis, which was from childhood trauma that I had in my 20s, but it was meditation that opened me up. Those are like your first wake up call. It's not an awakening like a spiritual awakening, but it's like a baby awakening where you wake up to your capacity to rewrite your own story and deliver a happier dream, right? To use that language of that spiritual traditions. So the major kind of lesson here is to not fret about these challenges and to don't look at them, like I said earlier, as, whoa, this is so bad that this happened to me. Instead, look at it and say, thank goodness this is happening to me because this is my opportunity.
Absolutely.
To wake up.
Yeah. And in my research, one of the things that was quite remarkable when we started to look at people who've navigated difficult seasons, difficult experiences, there was such this distinction between the people who are asking, why is this happening to me? Like you said, right? That mentality of like, this, what,
why me?
Yeah, why
Woe
me?
is
Or
me.
woe is me versus the person that says, this is what's happening. What's my next step? Where do I go from here? Who do I talk to? Where do I get help? And when we put ourselves in that action state, we move from that passive state again of being that victim to recognizing we have a lot more agency.
Yeah.
And we have also access to information now more so than we've ever had before about talking about things that before we never used to talk about. But now we have more of an opportunity to seek out and co-create different futures.
Yeah. I'm curious, and I think I know the answer, but back to your accident, and we'll move on from that. With this miraculous Joe and,
Yeah.
you know, all the attention on him and getting this award, did anyone really think that it was a miracle that you had the presence of mind to like get yourself out of a submerged car, swim to the surface, find a way to break through and actually survive that scenario?
Yeah,
Because
so interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Not probably 99% of people wouldn't be able to do that.
You're the first person, Mark, who's ever asked that question.
Interesting.
I think it's amazing that I want to honor and recognize our heroes, right?
course.
That I think it's so important that we
But
don't
a
forget
hero
acts of
exists
bravery.
in the context of the heroic action without
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Without the other part, there's no heroism. And so you were part and parcel of that. But it wasn't like you were just some victim of a car accident laying there and bleeding out. Like you had to be equally heroic just to be savable.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
pretty
you.
cool to think about, isn't it?
You are the first to say that.
That's amazing.
It's appreciated.
No, because as you know, I'm a waterman, and I actually am terrified of drowning. And I've almost drowned a couple times. I got stuck in the escape hatch of a submarine once, right? Where I'm running out of air, and the door was jammed open. It's jammed, and they're trying to do tap signals and everything, and they had to send a swimmer down from the surface to figure out how to jimmy the door open. I guess the emergency procedure would have been to surface, but even then, that doesn't necessarily mean they could drain the escape trunk because it's on the side of the submarine. So I was kind of screwed. And I remember, similar to what your comment was, I wasn't in a fearful state. I wasn't panicking. In fact, I was really slowing my breathing down. I was doing my box breathing practice, and I was trying to conserve my energy, and I was trying to get into that like really relaxed state because I knew that if I freaked out, I would probably die.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then literally in the last like minute of breath that I had left, or oxygen I had left, Mr.
Wow.
Navy SEAL friend pops his, somehow gets it unjammed,
Yeah.
pops his head in, is like, come on with me.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And again, I'm so fascinated by the human condition that our bodies are able to protect ourselves, and the fact that our nervous systems are able to settle. But it comes, as you said, with training. Like that's not our default setting. Our default setting is not to go into that place.
No, and it's to seize into fear.
That's right.
If you go into like severe fight or flight, there's like gradations in my view, right? Like hyperarousal and burnout is mild to intermediary fight or flight. It still affects obviously your nervous system, but it affects your intellect as well.
Yes.
But like severe fight or flight, like a major shock or an accident, or like you're at an event and then bullets start flying, that will literally cut your IQ down to about 75.
Yes, we see that in the research. Yes.
And most people don't realize that. They immediately become dumber.
Yes. Absolutely.
And their perceptual range just collapses.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
To a very narrow range, just like that guy in the parking lot screaming at his wife.
Yeah.
He can't see beyond this very narrow,
That focus point.
perceptual range. And a lot of the other sensory stuff gets shunted, right? Because your body's getting ready for fight or flight or freeze or fawn.
Exactly.
So at any rate, I think that's important to know for an acute crisis. But let's get back to hope. Most people today, as I said in my introduction, I think are in a state of hyperarousal, and it becomes a new normal because from my understanding and research, when you are really heavily activating the sympathetic nervous system and you're not using the parasympathetic, then it literally will atrophy, because these are neural pathways that activate neurochemicals, and the neural pathways aren't being used while the other ones are getting over-clicked, over-indexed on. And so then it becomes almost where you can't get into rest and digest.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so then that becomes your new normal, where you took an IQ test at some point in your past and you think, well, I've got 130 IQ, 140. But no, because you're stuck in hyperarousal, so you actually have about 90 IQ or 100 IQ.
Yep. which
but
is
you
why
don't know it.
scrolling, and that's why some of
and
the
you're
things
doom
that happen.
scrolling, and you have much less agency in terms of control over your reactions.
Yes.
And this is why addictions start to get even grooved even deeper, and then negativity bias, right, starts to get grooved even deeper because you're stuck in hyperarousal, which is amygdala always smelling everything as danger now, instead of like at least having the opportunity to see some sort of stress as eustress instead of distress. And it's like a really slippery slope that starts out slow, like a snowball rolling down the hill, and then boom, it leads to serious burnout or some sort of crippling autoimmune deficiency or disease, or accidents because you're not paying attention, or just despair, which is like the opposite of hope. So, how does hope help us as an antidote? And what are, let's get into some of the practices or like the research. It took us a long time to get to
there you go.
the actual,
it's good.
crux of your expertise here. But.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. And I could share with you just before we dive into the hope piece, I remember just last February, I had a chance, I was doing some work in Las Vegas and they were like, what are we going to do? And people were doing all these different activities after our event. And I opted to go drive race cars in the desert because that felt like that's
why
better.
Not?
Yeah, why not? Because I'm here and I can, right? And I remember afterwards just sitting, and I had an instructor with me. We had a great time. And afterwards, I remember sitting there, and I remember saying to him, like, thank you for helping me like reset my baseline, because like I actually felt like my nervous system was like, oh, this is actually wild and scary. Not email.
That's not
right?
email.
Like, and so just thinking
not
about
sitting in traffic.
Exactly. Yeah. And it was just amazing to realize that there was this other threshold, like a beyond that, where there's just so much spaciousness in terms of how much farther you could go. But because I'd kind of gotten into that pattern that, again, when we're experiencing mastery of anything, we're going to be in autopilot more often. And so I was just kind of in doing my reps, going through the motions, and it felt wonderful to like actually activate my nervous system in a different way. And it was almost like this big reset. So my gentle invitation for folks is to, we got to shake things up every once in a while. What that looks like now, it doesn't mean you have to be driving, cars in the desert, race cars in the desert, but like just kind of check ourselves, because
you mean like doing something a little scary?
Yes, we have to challenge ourselves.
I agree with that.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, for example, like when I'm working with, different organizations, and they say, their biggest fear is like speaking. It's just like, wow, we gotta stop finding all these ways to mitigate that fear of speaking. We actually have to like put ourselves in situations where we can start to gain evidence that we actually can do hard things, that we're able to get onto the other side of fear. Because right now I feel like it's just getting like we're getting kind of circled in and closed in with our anxiety.
And to be fair, when we talk about hard things, we're not talking about doing Wim Hof and ice baths.
Right.
That's not hard. That's fun. That's easy. And there's some benefit to you for that, I think. We're talking about things that scare the shit out of you.
Yeah. Like maybe even a difficult conversation that you've been putting
Crucial
off
conversations.
for months.
Those are great.
Yeah. Leaving a dead end job because it's killing you, right?
Like even if you're making good money and you have to pay that mortgage.
Yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
That's a tough one.
So again, these are everyday scenarios where people are thinking that they're
leaving a relationship.
Leaving a relationship. Unhealthy or dysfunctional. And we have so much more capacity. But if we stay really in those limited beliefs, and physiologically, we're just going to kind of, as we talked about earlier, we can't outgrow or outperform our identity.
Right.
So if we think that this is all there is, and this is the best of it, or this is how you're supposed to do it. And I even found that in my own career where, I was, I had the dream job, right? I was working at a university. It came with all of these opportunities. And again, it worked for such a season in my life, but realizing like, my dream job was killing me. Yeah. It was impacting
you become limited by the institution and the organization,
exactly.
The people you hang around. The energy level or the conscious level, it's difficult to grow beyond that when you align with it. That's why I had to leave the SEALs or the military. I was like, I love these teammates, I love this mission, and I love the adventure and the risk, but I can't grow beyond the second, I call the second plateau protector kind of attitude of the military.
Yeah. And I remember actually coming across your
Same
work.
thing with the bureaucratic academic institution, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember that was what was so significant when I came across your first book that I had exposure to, and that was published in 2012. And you had one line in that book, Mark, that said, like, if you had a year left to live, what are you going to do different? Or what are you going to keep the same? And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like I had just experienced a significant loss with losing my mother, and she died way too young. And all of a sudden just having this like moment to realize like, I gotta change this. And recognizing it doesn't happen overnight, but I could start putting the pieces in place to build and co-create a future outside of what I was doing. And, you know, again, we go back to that understanding of like, what does it take to be able to take that first step? And I think it really comes down to clarity of knowing what is it that we want? How do we want to feel? And I remember sitting at the kitchen table, and I think I shared the story with you before where, you know, I came home again from a day at the university and I was in a mood, and Hunter at the time, he would have been probably about 14, my oldest son. And he said to me, he goes, Mom, like, can I give you some advice? And right. And
14-year-old
I love when you get advice. And he said, you know, remember when I was younger, right? So the 14-year-old is imparting wisdom from my youngerhood.
That's awesome.
And he said, and you told me I could be anything if I had the right attitude and I put in the work, right? Like if you have the right attitude and you put in the work, I really do believe that you can achieve some pretty bold dreams. And he said, so is that still true, Mom? And I was like, well, yeah, the right attitude and put in the work. Yeah, you can kind of co-create, build what it is you want. And then he said, well, why isn't it true for you? Like, why are you staying stuck here? And I remember just having this turning point where I was like, you're right, you know. And he said, Mom, I'd bet on you every day. Like no one, no one's going to work harder for this family than you. Wow. And he's like, so what's that going to take for us to, you know, for you to show up, not sad, burned out, overwhelmed, exhausted, like for you to actually do what it is that you want to do. Yeah. So we have those moments where, we have turning points.
You can't, what's the term? Outlive your identity?
You can't outperform
your identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with that. The way I articulate that is, if you want to achieve something really stupendous, you got to become worthy, right, of achieving that thing. And so it's not so much about just the doing, like setting the goals. In fact, I was on Fox News last night, and this is the conversation. We're talking about goals and New Year's resolutions. And I said, the problem with this is that you set something that's like a numbers doing target, but you don't also simultaneously set another goal for who you need to be. To achieve that target. And those two are like hand in a glove. Right? The being and the doing. And so in order to change your identity, you have to be able to see and believe in a new identity.
Absolutely.
And then the work is actually not so much in trying to attain that, but getting rid of the stuff that is blocking that, because that's actually who you really are, right? It's an aspect of who you really are, or else you wouldn't be able to see it and believe it. And so the work is actually about letting go of things that are in the way, ideas, beliefs, patterns, habits, subconscious programming. And that process of surrendering, just constantly letting go and getting rid of that stuff is actually the real work.
That is the work. And we often, a dear friend of mine, Phil M. Jones, talks about this idea that it's the work before the work. Yeah. Right? Nobody wants to do the work.
When you do that hard work, then the attainment of the goal becomes easy because it just happens.
It does. Absolutely.
That's what we call life flow or alignment, right? It seems miraculous. It's joyful. It didn't seem like work.
Yes, which is beautiful. It's a beautiful state to be.
It's a beautiful thing. Yeah, I love that.
And we talk about this idea that like habits don't stick just because we want them bad enough. Yeah. Right? We have to create systems. We have to create
the system, and the systems include who you are.
Exactly. And
so doing that work every day, like that, that's why that aligns so beautifully with like the emotional development and spiritual development. Unite right there. Asking, who am I really? And what's in the way of that? And knowing who I am really, what's my future look like? And all of that is done right here, right now. Anyways, we perceive it to be past and future, but really is creating in this moment. Take it to a day if you like. You only have today, one day, one lifetime. In this moment, this day, what do I need to get rid of? And who am I becoming? And if you can get clear on that and then work on the getting rid of part, then the becoming is natural, because that where you're becoming, who you're becoming is already you.
Yeah. And again, one of the things to add to that beautiful example would be that piece around, also getting clarity around, like, instead of like goal setting, we talk about feeling setting.
I like
It's
that.
like, how do you want to feel? So, for example, I was working with a colleague, and it's a high performer. Like, physiologist, works with like athletes, Olympians. He's unbelievable. Dr. Greg, and we were talking. He goes, Robyne, I want to feel less stressed. I want to have clarity and all this. I'm like, okay, so you want to feel calm, right? You want to feel calm in all the chaos. And he's like, okay, yeah.
That
I'm
works,
like,
yeah.
So
State it in the positive.
exactly. Let's
Instead
state
of
it in the
things
positive.
I don't want, you
Exactly.
state what you do want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm like, okay, well, what does that feel like? And so, he explained, like, this is what calm would feel like for me, while also being a high performer, being successful, all the things. And I'm like, okay, so what are some behaviors or habits that would allow that idea of being calm be able to take root? Like, where instead of saying like, oh, I want to decrease this or I want to increase that, thinking about how is it that I want to feel. So going into the new year, 2026, do you want to feel steady? Do you want to feel well-resourced? Do you want to feel grounded? Do you want to feel calm? Okay, well, what behaviors are you doing right now that are incongruent with that?
Yeah,
Right. And what I see in the work that I do with people, and I work with organizations and groups and people all over the world, is you'll get more of a return on your investment getting rid of the things like the bad habits than you ever will with adding new things.
100%.
Right. So it's like figuring out, and an exercise to get it really tactical and practical for your listeners is to sit down, give yourself pause, and just ask yourself, like, if I'm being honest with myself, this is true. Like, if I'm being honest with myself, this, scrolling for 3 hours a day mindlessly. If I'm being honest with myself, I'm scared to leave a job that is not good for me. If I'm being honest with myself, my eating behavior is not aligned with my goals of aging well, for example. Like, if you get people to actually sit with what is it, as you say, that's in the way, you can have some remarkable breakthroughs that you don't have to chase or buy, or, it's this hype cycle that we see right now, especially this season where there's so many different pieces. It's, if I'm being honest with myself, people intuitively know what they're doing that's holding themselves back.
Definitely. Yeah, that's cool. So how do we feel? What does hope feel like? And how do we feel that?
Yeah, I love that question. So hope feels like possibility in the body. It feels like possibility. And one of the questions I often get asked
So
is
it's an expansiveness as opposed to a contraction.
Spaciousness. Yeah.
Spaciousness.
And again, a limitlessness.
Limitlessness.
It's also this
Optimistic.
Yeah. Interestingly, there's the distinction between hope and optimism, I think, is useful.
Yeah.
Optimism usually is attached to an outcome, right? Like, I want to get that job. I want to meet that person. I want this opportunity.
You can't just be optimistic about a future, though, as opposed to...
To me, that would be hope-filled.
Okay,
it's that I'm not
interesting.
attached to the outcome,
Right.
but I'm trusting it's going to be good. Like, it's time to get our hopes up. It's time to, if we hold all this space of thinking about the worst things that can happen, or all the bad things, or all the things that could go wrong, if we hold space for that, and people do it all the time, well, we can also do it in the opposite direction. Like, what would it feel like for this to, unfold in a perfect way? It doesn't mean I know exactly how it's going to unfold.
Yeah.
I'm trusting that I'll be well-resourced. The right people will come across my path.
It may not look pretty all the time.
No, it definitely won't. The messy middle is what is like the best, because and then when you're in that messy middle, that something on the other side of this is going to be pretty amazing.
Right.
Because everything that feels really good, like that kind of, if you think about it from a neurochemical perspective, that like the dopamine drip versus like the dopamine dump. Right. So, for example, a lot of our, just how we spend our free time, it's like this dump, right? The mindlessness and numbing effect, which is a dopamine dump, versus that drip is that like slow, steady progression towards that big, bright future.
Oh, that's cool.
It feels good.
Is hopelessness the absence of hope? It sounds like it is, but it seems to me that hopelessness is more like giving up and despair, right?
Yes.
And so it's hard for me to see how you go immediately from hope to hopelessness. It might be some things that happen in between that take away the ability to perceive hope.
100%. And in my writing, in my first book, I wrote about this idea that when I experienced my first depressive episode, the best way I could describe it was as if that like little pilot light in our soul had gone out. Like I didn't feel hopelessness. I didn't feel helplessness. I didn't even feel numb. Mark, I felt nothing.
Yeah.
It was literally like this void of all things. And I remember being institutionalized in an adult psychiatric facility at 16. again, a very tumultuous time
This
in my
is
life.
before the car accident.
Yeah, before my accident.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to my mom, I'm like, people are talking about like what they're going to do after high school. I'm like, I can't see myself or imagine myself at 18.
Wow.
Like I couldn't even see a future. And what was so beautiful in that moment, my mother had the insight, the wisdom to say, let me tell you what I see. Right.
Oh,
I
cool.
see one day that you are going to get to on the other side of these struggles. I see that one day you're calling to be a teacher, to be an educator, to have that compassionate, sensitive heart is going to do good. And she's like, I imagine you being a mom and how great of a mother that you will be, how hard you will fight for your kids. And she slowly, just with her belief in me and my skill sets and our skills, our talents and our gifts, she was able to help me start to imagine again, which then all of a sudden got that little pilot light rekindled. And that was that little spark of possibility. And I remember very much what it felt like when that came back on. And Mark, it was just like this energizing force that said like, there's work to be done and you got to get to work.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think when we think about how do we don't go from hopelessness to hope filled.
Right.
There's this recognizing that things are hard right now and there is a lot of despair, and it's not discounting the fact that the world feels pretty broken and pretty unwell right now. It's recognizing that like in each moment, there's things that we can do that are going to bring us closer to that state of how we want to be. And there's a lot of things that we could do that will get us farther away from where we want to be. And it's choosing to see hope. Right, we have to choose to look for it, because as soon as you start looking for it,
you'll find it.
You'll find it. You'll
Wherever
find
you
it
put
wherever
your
you are.
attention, you'll find what you're
Absolutely.
looking for. I
Yeah.
love that. So, hope is a practice.
It's 100% a practice.
Yeah.
That is a strategy that does change us.
So hope is a strategy
it is,
when
Mark,
it's combined with a practice.
with action. Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just wishful thinking.
Exactly. It reminds me, I like to say that in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they are not.
Exactly. I love that.
I can't remember who first said that, but it wasn't me.
It's good recognizing.
Anyway,
I
it's
love
the
that.
same thing, right?
Yeah.
When we're talking about hope as a strategy, that's because if you're just looking at it as a theory, it's not a good strategy.
Yeah.
But if you look at hope as a set of practices that you're constantly turning away from and in denial of, I call it starving fear, and turning toward the hope-filled thoughts, attitudes, beliefs, actions, behaviors, I call that feeding courage. Well,
That's right.
then
Yes.
over time you're cultivating those qualities, you're creating new neural pathways, and your perception is looking for good instead of expecting bad.
Yes.
And then guess what? There's a reflective universe. It's going
right.
to
You see
give
it
you
everywhere.
right back what you're looking for and what you believe and perceive.
Yeah. And even in the hardest days, like the hardest, most difficult days is, again, even when I'm working with people who've experienced like horrific trauma and awful, awful seasons of grief, even in the midst of it, they do find moments, Mark, where they're able to see a small gesture or some just like tiny little sign or just something that just gives them a little bit more ability to persist and to persevere.
Yeah, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the Stress Wisely framework. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so very similar to your work in the sense it's very complementary. It's recognizing that, being able to navigate stress is not the enemy, it's our ally.
Right.
And when we're able to work with
Stress
our
for
nervous,
success.
That's right,
Jim Lear said
exactly.
that. I love that.
I love that. And it's the idea that it's not just physical, like that's one component of it, but it's also spiritual, occupational, financial. And it's recognizing so often it's not about doing more. It's about sometimes doing less, but with intention of like recognizing what are those areas that, perhaps I'm procrastinating, or maybe I even have some protest behavior around. But if I really show up and face it and get clarity, we can actually get ourselves into a pretty steady state of being able to show up in every season of our life. So I find when I work with groups and organizations about the stress framework, again, it's having that mindset shift that we're not trying to get rid of stress. And you hear all these promises that you can get rid of stress, just do this, just do that. Well, the reality is if we just slow down, right? If we just slow down and get clarity and be able to make wise choices. And again, as you described, when we're in that acute state of hyperarousal, our critical thinking is gone, right? We're garbage truck thinking, right? Where it's just not able to see what matters most. But when we just slow down and be able to, set intention of where we want to go, as you said, that worthiness of working towards that, we see people are able to navigate even seasons like this, where there's so many things outside of our control, but you're able to stay calm in that chaos.
Sure. Yeah. Slow is smooth.
Smooth is fast, says Mark Divine. I quote you so often, and I get so cheese, Mark, when people like attribute that to somebody else. And I tell you, I'm all about proper attributions, and so I always be like, yeah, that was Mark Divine. That was in the way. Yeah. So just so you know, I love that you bring that
credit to the
forward.
Navy SEALs for that.
Yeah, there you go.
How do you design a good day?
I really love that question. So first of all, I look at it like a good day doesn't happen by chance.
No,
it doesn't
I agree.
happen by accident.
I say you have to win in your mind before you step foot in the battlefield.
Yeah. So my strategy that I found super helpful, and again, my intention always in the work that I do, Mark, is I want to be useful, right?
Yeah.
I want people to be like, hey, this is useful. The strategy that I share is this idea of like thinking of your day in quarters. So recognizing that in each quarter of my day, I have 4 quarters, and I know enough about myself that what I do in my first quarter is going to make the biggest impact on the rest
Do you
of my day.
include sleep in those 4 quarters?
So
is that a 24-hour period?
I love that question. So I usually
because I'm doing the math in my head. I'm like, what's the first quarter? Where's
so I treat this actually in my quarters would actually be probably closer to 16. So optimally trying to work towards 8 hours of recovery, which is sleep behavior, 8 hours of performance, which is what we do, our livelihoods, our lifestyles, and then 8 hours of connection, right, of what that looks like. And
so design the 16 hours,
my
but also
16
prep
hours.
for the 8.
Yeah, 100%. And so my first quarter, those first 4 hours of what I do first thing in the day is going to make or break whether or not I'm going to have a good day.
That's the
so
foundation.
That's
the
right.
kicking off point.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's how quickly I can get outside. Right. Yeah. So even again, living in Canada, it's not optimal. There's lots of reasons to not want to go outside, but getting outdoors as quickly as possible. We know there's enormous amounts of benefit for our nervous system. Also, too, I always make sure that I set some intention. What do I have the energy for today? So I use an exercise where you just ask myself, right, how am I really today? Am I 80%? Am I 60%, or am I locked in 100%? Let's take it down. And what I want to do is ensure that the day that I'm designing is going to be in alignment with the amount of energy that I have to give that day.
Right.
And we see recovery happens quicker, the quicker we can get into practices of alignment. So I also know for me, connection is so important. So making sure that I need to check in with my people. My oldest are at university. I have to see their faces because so making sure that there's a FaceTime call in there.
FaceTime of every day?
Oh, 100%. I need to see his eyes. I could text messages will go so far, right? But I actually have to see his face, and I can tell by looking at his face. And that's a practice my colleague, Dr. James Rouse, he does with his daughters as well, that we got to see their faces, right? And as soon as within a second of seeing your kid, if it's good or not good. And I love that saying that you can only be as well as your saddest child. And
I've never heard that. That's cool.
You can only be as happy as your saddest child. So I have to make sure my peeps are good. And as long as they're good, Mark, everything else is fine, right? As long as my people are okay, everything else, it's going to work itself out and I'll figure it out. But that's what matters most to me. And I make sure I do what matters most, make what matters most matter most. Yeah.
And what practices help you transition to the second quarter and make that really good and into the third?
Of course. So
because each one has a different quality.
That's right. Yeah. And I've learned about myself as somebody who has learning disabilities, ADHD, which is why, example, school wasn't my friend back in the day. I am highly effective and productive in 3-hour blocks. And so, and interesting, I was just working with a performance coach myself, and he's like, wow, if we get this much output from you, Robyne, in 3 hours, can you imagine if we added just an hour? And I'm like, dude, you won't get it. And it's because I know myself well enough that I can be time on task really well for 3 hours. After that, I'm going to protest, right? Not consciously, but my performance is going to start to decrease. Right. And so again, having a really, really productive, a 3-hour block. And I think when you create the right scenarios and the environments, your 3 hours could be another person's 8-hour workday, right? I can just lock in, focus, and get it done. And then I take my play and fun as seriously I do my work. And one of my strategies, Mark, is I always plug in the play first and the recovery. So play for me could be going to a yoga class. It could be going for a big hike, going for a run, training for the 29029, which is coming up in August for me. That's fun. I enjoy that type of activity. but I put it in my calendar before any of the appointments, before any of the events, any of the consulting, any of the coaching. Because
so you
I think
play first.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I book it first.
You book it first.
To make sure that it's
you
in
make
there.
sure it doesn't get overwhelmed.
So I don't try to fit it in around the work.
Yeah, that's so
work,
important.
The
I'm
work
glad
happens.
you said that. Right?
Yeah,
The term OBE, overcome by events.
that's right.
People have their health and their recovery OBE most of the
right.
time, because once you get into it, and other things start happening, and then your motivation, your energy starts getting depleted. So unless you have that ironclad, schedule and commitment to it, it's easy to blow it off.
Yeah. And to me, I treat them the same as non-negotiables, right? And I appreciate that there's a lot of privilege. There's a particular season in our lives, especially professionally, where we do have to hustle, achieve, perform, do, but that can't be for 40 years, right? I think that we have to adapt new strategies. And I'm appreciative to be at this point where I'm able to have that agency over my day.
Yeah, me too.
Again, it's the best way to do it. And on this pace, I feel like I can do this forever. Right? It's not just I'm doing it until this marker when I can retire. Like, no, if I do it this way, I see that there's longevity there.
Right. And all these practices, right? They have, there's like a 5-mountain aspect to it, right? There's physical and physiological adaptation and balancing that's going on, right? There's mental pruning, turning away from negative conditioning, letting go, focusing, deep work, right? So that. And emotionally, right, they're all making you feel more optimistic and more on target and more in control or having that agency, which all points toward more hope.
That's right.
Because things are working. There's you have evidence that things are working now. And I think a lot of people, they don't know how to get this ball rolling, so to speak, to get the feedback mechanism, like, oh, this works.
Yes.
In your work with clients, like how long does it take for them to get the evidence to where they're like, oh, wow, like there's no going back?
Yeah, interesting question. And interesting, as a behaviorist, what I want to find when I'm working with any group is how quickly that this can become intrinsically reinforced.
Yeah.
Right. That's the goal, right? How quickly can we make this so it's just like we have this, positive adaptation where this is just how I do it. And again, it's just like I think the little things aren't that little after all. Right. So for example, even like if somebody, let's say, works on a computer all day, it's like, okay, so you're sitting down all day. Can you make sure that every hour you get up just for 60 seconds and move around, right? Grab some water, roll your shoulders, like just break up some of the monotony of your day. If you're looking at a computer screen, for example, can you look away for 20 seconds, look 20 feet out into the distance and just give your optimal system a bit of a reset, right? So there's small little micro behaviors that when we do those things, we get an instant benefit, right? It's the same as when all of a sudden, even just like that act of like pushing away from your desk, grabbing that water, right? The simplest things we actually start to see add up, and that investment in your time and your energy, it's going to start to have the biggest impact.
Yeah, I agree with that. I've been recommending my clients to kind of shift their perspective around work blocks. So even if you have like a 3-hour deep work and that's what you've blocked, to schedule it in 45 or 50-minute blocks, and then take that 10 minutes for recovery and take a walk, do some box breathing, do some push-ups if you want, or just sit there and meditate.
Or burpees to Thunderstruck. I heard is a good
burpees to Thunderstruck works.
Mark Divine special. 32 times, 32 burpees in the song. Yeah.
There are actually, I think 33 maybe.
Oh, there you go.
You'll have to try it to find out for yourself.
I will find out. Yeah, it's thunder or thunderstruck, right? It's
right.
Yeah,
the word thunder.
Yes, okay, thunder. Okay,
and it's subtle because you hear more thunderstrucks than you heard before.
I bet, especially in that last
because
part
each one
of it.
comes with a burpee.
You're like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, so it's something like that.
Yes.
But also for meetings, right? So if you're, first of all, think about having fewer meetings.
100%.
Right? That are much more intentional, because people are, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. But schedule your meetings to end well before the hour, and cultivate a practice of a quick, personal debrief, or even as a group, like end the meeting.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, meeting's over. Pause. Let it digest. What did we learn? What went well? What didn't go well? What was unsaid? That can be done great. What a great way to really build trust, right? If you just stop the meeting and have a pause time.
Yeah, take a step out.
Take a step out and relax.
And that cultivates
And
that.
there's research on that now.
Oh, 100%.
The brain then starts to process and digest, like the dust settles. And if you're combining it with some resiliency practices like breath work or going for a walk outside or, just like I call them spot drills, then throughout the day you're doing that.
That's
and
right.
You're getting all the positive benefits of kind of what needs to happen in your brain to distill, process, retain what needs to retain, get rid of what doesn't. Otherwise, that happens at night, and this is why people wake up with that idea or I shouldn't have said that, or all that stuff happens at night.
We're in a reactive state. And interestingly, the psychology and the physiology behind that is when we're doing that, like that beta brainwave state of hustle, do, achieve, perform, like we're not reflecting, right? So that's a whole different type of brain frequency.
brain.
And that's not woo-woo, it's literally science, right? Our brains are on these different frequencies. And it's this idea that the longer we stay stuck in the same frequency, that there's only so much energy and oxygen-rich blood that's going to go to that part of our brain. But when we can change the frequencies, which we know is, even again, as you said, like we push away from the desk, we do some breath work and say, okay, hey, what just happened? What's working? What isn't working? What is, as you said, what isn't being said? Or how can we do this in a different way? All of a sudden, we're in that place of reflectivity. And that cultivates a different part of our neurological system, which is going to then kind of take that exhale, that moment to slow down, to get clarity, which all of a sudden people say like, oh my gosh, my leader, the psychological safety scores go up. My leader is so engaged. And really what it's doing is it's just giving a wee bit of a pattern interrupt. So that way the different parts of the brain are being activated.
Very cool. Any other final things about hope that we haven't touched on? Like, here's one, like what's the number one thing can someone do after listening to this who's feeling like inspired and be like, I really need more hope in my life?
Yeah, I love that question. So a practice that we talk about is this idea about first, like choose hope, or like make even
First,
just that
choose
self,
hope,
like literally just making that decision that I want to choose hope. And again, there's so much noise, there's so much negativity, there is so much despair. And it's a business model, right? Like at the absolute end of the day, it's a business model to put people in a state of fear and not getting people's hopes up. And right now, Mark, what I see is that people are scared to get.
It's a very lucrative business
It's
model.
a very lucrative business model. And what I see is people are scared to get their hopes up. And because, what's the reality, right? That it stays like this. And that's actually pretty scary. And so, again, we're going to choose hope. And again, as we already talked about, we're going to look for it. Because as soon as you start seeing it, as soon as you start identifying it around you,
can't unsee it.
You can't unsee it. And it's something as, something as simple as, again, just being mindful of what content we're taking in, right? Like we don't need to have the news on every hour of the day. The first 5 minutes will give you enough to know what's happening in the world. Choose to lean into stories of people showing up for each other, of good things unfolding. And that's one of the amazing things that I just love so much about sports is it's like there's so many examples of just teammanship, of people showing up for each other, these like amazing comeback stories, right? So just immerse yourself in possibility. And there's a lot of it out there. And the last one is very much to action it, right? You can do that for someone else. And, we talk about this idea in psychology that, even just paying it forward, like doing a small gesture for somebody else. And the best way to help yourself when you're stuck in despair is to help others. And
we teach that in our SEAL training.
Yeah,
right?
100%. And
you're feeling down, help someone else.
100%. Get out of our own way. Get out of our own head.
Leave a carbon copy on yourself.
That's right. Yeah. And when all else fails, it's dogs. Right? When all else fails, it's dogs. There's
a reason dog
absolutely.
is God spelled backwards.
100%. Totally. And again, just the simple, they're amazing little masterful teachers on mindfulness.
They sure are. Right?
It's like every day's the best day. Just be excited and fall in love with your life again. Even if your life isn't exactly how you wish it to be right now, and hope it is. I think we have to learn how to appreciate the ordinary, because then we can be extraordinary when we need to be.
Wow, that's cool. So I hope so. How to choose hope even when it is hard. Where do people learn more? Do you have a URL you like people to go to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So the website, drrobyn.ca, or on social media.
And Robyne spelled Robyne. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just in case someone's driving and they're like American, Robin.
There you go.
Wrong Robyne.
Yeah, Robyne. That's right.
RobyneYME.ca.
.ca, yes.
Dr. Robyne YMC. drrobyn.ca. Okay. And social media?
Yes, Dr. Robyne. Same there as well.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
It's a
you,
great
Mark.
conversation.
This was fun. I appreciate you.
I was hopeful it'd be a good one.
Oh, there you go. I was hope sowing too.
Thanks for tuning into the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to have Robyne with me today. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, ma'am. And I appreciate you walking this path of growth and impact with us. If this conversation with Robyne really inspired you, then please share it with your friends or your family. Pay it forward. Help other people find more hope, really, and help us to make this a more hopeful world together. To learn more about my work, you can visit my website at markdivine.com or, of course, social media, Instagram, Mark Divine Official, same thing at Facebook, or my LinkedIn profile. You can explore my leadership training and coaching programs. We work with corporations and individuals and all sorts of good stuff going on there. So check it out. Until next time, remember, you create your reality. So if you're experiencing stress, which everyone's experiencing, then you need to change your relationship to that. And one way to do that is by becoming more hopeful and following some of the advice of our guest today, Dr. Robyne. So until next time, develop that hope. See you soon.